All right. We're here. It's Wednesday, June 17th, 2026, about 11:27 a.m. Pacific. And we're covering Fed Chairman Kevin Warsh first news conference as a Fed chairman. I believe they had left rates unchanged. So that's kind of where we're at right now. Right around 3.5 to 3.75. He should be presenting shortly. So we look forward to hearing from the new Fed Chairman Kevin Warsh. Inflation's been ticking up 4%, first time for 3 years it's been that high. We got the 10-year Treasury right around 443. Brent crude down to 77 from 118. That was the top around April 29th, was 118. So it sounds like Trump's been confiscating these or grabbing these oil tankers and keeping the price of oil down, which is a good thing. Financing is very plentiful for net lease properties. So we're seeing very plentiful financing. We're still right around 5 5/8 to 6 1/4 for a 5, 7, 10-year fixed with like a 25 to 30-year AM. We have right now we're doing a Dollar General deal, 2 to 3 year IO, and then it amortizes over 25 to 30 years. So financing still very liquid for net lease properties that are BBB minus or better occupied. We're seeing loan to values anywhere between 50 to 70% with like 115 to 130 minimum debt coverage. So we should see the presentation shortly. He should be on shortly. Let me just get into that mode. And we should start momentarily here. He should be presenting. So it'll be interesting to see what he says today. Okay, here we go. Let's listen in. He should be coming to the stage here and see what he's saying about interest rates in the economy. All right. One other thing to talk about, most of the other Federal Reserve Market Committee is hawkish. They feel that the economy's hot. So that's an interesting thing. We'll see what he says about that. He may see some conflict if he starts to lower rates with the other committee members, but we'll see. We'll see about that when he presents here shortly. Deutsche Bank did an analysis and they found that 11 of the Federal Open Market Committee members were hawkish, 5 were neutral, and 1 was dovish. So let's see what he says. Should be interesting. He's not coming on yet. I don't know why, but let's just stay patient here. He should be on shortly. It's 11:31 Pacific, and they said it was going to start right around 11:30. All right. We've seen the stock market doing really good. Let me see where the Dow is right now. Looks like he's going to come on. Oh, here he comes. Okay, let's listen in. Kevin Warsh, new Federal Reserve Chairman.
Good day. It's an honor, a true honor to be back at the Federal Reserve and to take up this duty at a time of such consequence. I've been especially heartened by the warm welcome of old friends and new colleagues both. And I've listened closely to my fellow FOMC members, heard a lot of new ideas, new thinking, and genuine interest in moving the Fed forward. This week's FOMC meeting exemplified the very best of the Fed's traditions: rigorous debate, open-mindedness, commitment to mission, responsibility, and accountability for performance. In this business, they all add up to one thing: getting monetary policy right, or as near to it as we can do. That is our North Star. My colleagues and I are here to serve our legislative remit, which you've heard us say before: price stability and maximum employment. And these objectives guided our business in the meeting just concluded. As you saw a few moments ago, the committee decided to maintain the target range for the Fed funds rate at 3.5 to 3.75% in support of the Fed's.
So they left rates unchanged.
The committee also reaffirmed its policy of maintaining ample reserves in the banking system. Economic activity is expanding at a solid pace, despite elevated uncertainty that owes in part to the conflict in the Middle East. Productivity growth and capital investment, both strong. Job gains have kept pace with the workforce, and the unemployment rate has changed little. We recognize that inflation has been running well ahead of the Fed's long-stated inflation goal of 2%. That's been going on for more than 5 years. Persistently high prices are a burden for the American people. But the recent past need not be prologue. I am pleased to report that members of the FOMC are unambiguous and unanimous. This committee will deliver price stability. At any institution, a change in leadership is a natural and timely opportunity to reaffirm its mission, to review current practices, and to consider whether those practices best meet our objectives. My Fed colleagues and I will be working in close collaboration to ask what changes might improve the conduct of monetary policy. On that score, you might have already noticed something, a difference in today's policy statement. It's a bit shorter, a bit simpler, and it dispenses with some older language. That statement just gives you the facts as best we can judge it. Absent also is so-called forward guidance, which we agreed was not well suited to the current policy conjuncture. This afternoon,
So no forward
you
guidance.
also received the usual summary of economic projections. It's been the practice of this committee for participants to submit these projections, and I have encouraged my colleagues to continue to do so. I, however, have refrained from offering any projections of my own, consistent with my long-held views on the SEP, at least as currently structured. In the median projections, real GDP rises at 2.2% this year, 2.3% next year, and total PC inflation runs at 3.6% this year, 2.3% next year. The unemployment rate stands at about 4.3%.
So he's saying
The median participant
inflation 2 to
judges the
3%.
appropriate federal funds rate to be at 3.8% at the end of this year and 3.6% at the end of next. Let me turn now to a few words on a key initiative that we're announcing today. I'm appointing a task force in each of 5 areas that are central to the broad conduct of monetary policy. First, Fed communications. Second, the Fed's balance sheet. Third, our use and reliance on existing data sources. Fourth, productivity and jobs in an era of transformation. And last, the Fed's inflation frameworks. These subjects are timely, consequential, and in my view, worthy of a fresh look. My colleagues and I discussed them with energy and purpose over the last couple of days. For each of these independent task forces, I'm enlisting some of the very best minds, both inside and outside the economics profession. They will be supported by subject matter specialists from our superb Fed staff. And they'll have a straightforward charge. Start with first principles. Ask hard questions. Examine current practice. Consider alternatives. And ultimately propose next steps for policymakers. considered changes, including to the SEP I mentioned a few moments ago. The second task force, the one on balance sheet policy, will review the benefits and risks of the current ample reserves regime and the composition of the Fed's balance sheet. They will assess alternative frameworks for the conduct and operation of monetary policy. The third task force, the one on data, will evaluate new information sources and consider methodological changes to improve data gathering, with the aim of giving policymakers more accurate, relevant, contemporaneous, and perhaps most important, actionable information on the state of our economy. Fourth, the task force on productivity and jobs. It'll survey the pace, the reach, the economic impact of new general purpose technologies, including AI, and explore the implications for the Fed in pursuit of our employment and inflation mandates. The last task force, the one on inflation frameworks, that'll examine the drivers of inflation, first principles, and weigh the full range of ideas for delivering price stability in a changing economy. You'll hear quite a bit more about these task forces and this overall initiative in the coming weeks. Enough for now to make a simple statement. Each task force will serve an objective shared by everyone in the system, shared by everyone around that table that I sat with over the last couple of days. A Federal Reserve that is clear-eyed about its mission, fit for purpose, and focused on the future. And with that, I appreciate your attention. I'm happy to take your questions.
All right, let's listen into the questions. Pretty simple press conference.
Good to see you again, and welcome back. This is a lot to be putting in motion so fast. What is the timeline you have in mind for each of these?
So I think it'll depend on the task force. It also depends on the urgency in which we need clear answers. My expectation, I'm still in the business of recruiting and finalizing them. My expectation is the task forces will begin work in the next couple of weeks, and we'll start to get some more information from them, some more framing of how they see things starting in the fall end. Hopefully most, if not all of them, concluding by year end.
And just specifically on the inflation framework, you talk about first principles. Does this include a review of the 2% target itself? You've mentioned that things to the right of the decimal point don't matter. Should this be starting from a premise that 2% as a point estimate is too strict?
Let me break that into two pieces. First, on the inflation framework review, their remit is, what are the drivers of inflation? What's the Fed's responsibility for inflation? In part, how do we measure inflation? But that'll overlap with my data group. On the 2% inflation objective, that is the Federal Reserve's long-held objective of 2%. You've heard me say before, I tend to focus on the left of the decimal point. Well, the 2 is the left of the decimal point. For now, 0 is to the right. I see no reason until we have reestablished our commitment and ability to deliver on the 2% inflation objective to revisit that. So that'll be outside the scope of what we're taking on.
Thank you so much. Colby Swift from the New York Times. You've in the past said that inflation is a choice, and in the policy statement, it includes this pledge to deliver price stability, as you've reiterated today. But looking at the SEP, the bulk of your colleagues expect core PCE to run around 3.3% by year end, and for the 2% inflation target not to be reached until 2028. So I'm curious how patient you think the Fed can afford to be at this juncture in terms of waiting for one-time inflation waves to wash through and for underlying inflation to step down after so many years of inflation running above target, and under what circumstances you would support the Fed taking some action and raising rates.
Sure. So quite a bit there. Let me try to break that into pieces. First, we have the capability and commitment to deliver on our price stability objective of 2%. That's exactly what we're going to do.
Still going to try to
Fed's review of its strategy over the last any number of years. In January, the Fed, including the strategy that we're still bound by, the Fed statement says that inflation is primarily determined by monetary policy. You bet it is. I've said for years, inflation is a choice. You bet it is. And today I'm announcing that this committee unambiguously and unanimously have decided we are going to deliver on that. The rest of your questions sounded like a encouragement for me to give forward guidance. We've dropped forward guidance. Some along the committee, I think, dropped it, I suspect, from our discussion the last couple of days, because they said at this moment in time, it doesn't feel as though providing forward guidance is right. Others have, I'd say, different views and think as a general proposition, forward guidance isn't the business we should be in. But that'll be taken up by the task force on communications and my policymaker colleagues. We're going to listen hard to what the experts say and make our own decision. But I can't give any forward guidance about what we're going to do next. The good news is we'll be meeting in 6 weeks.
So just following up, I guess, on the current policy settings, then I am curious how restrictive you think things are at the current moment, given the flow of data that we've seen and, forecasts that are coming down the pipeline.
Yeah, I've heard characterizations both inside and the Fed about that. I'll give you my own. It's uneven. If I look at the housing markets as one example, Fed policy isn't the single determinant of the state of the housing market, but broadly, I would say Fed policy appears to be somewhat restrictive. I would have a hard time.
Interest rates started ticking up right around
see what's happening in financial markets.
the time Trump
that's perhaps a
attacked
function of
Iran
different transmission mechanisms of monetary
and the
policy.
Strait of Hormuz
Whether
went
monetary
haywire.
policy is
That was
coming
when
from our
rates started
interest rate
ticking
tool or
up.
our balance sheet
I
tool.
think we were sub
But there's
4
been a task
before
force
that.
on that too, and the balance
And
sheet
that
task force will be
probably
more of that subject.
we were getting down to like 5.5.
You've said you don't like
595. I think we're up from there a little bit
this time, but with
probably
the
for
dot
investment
line
grade
numbers
credit,
suggested that they want a rate increase
5 and
by the end
5/8
of
to
the
6
year,
and a quarter
and
now.
the markets have taken that as forward guidance. So what does this mean in terms of how you guide the markets and in terms of what the dot plot's future is?
I'm going to have to give you the same answer I gave to Ms. Smith. We've got a task force for that. I'll give you a little bit more. I reviewed the dot plots, and when I saw the submissions, I noted that all the submissions were coming in with pencils, those kind with the big erasers. That's to say that I think my colleagues around the table, when they submitted their dots, understand the world is changing quite quickly. And they didn't feel bound by them 6 weeks from now or 6 days from now in the event that their circumstances change. I'll note a couple other things. What I heard around the table was, as they submitted their modal forecasts, to be clear, this was more likely than not. This was more likely than their other scenarios. So I didn't hear tons of conviction. What I heard was the kind of humility that I think we should have. I did not submit a dot. For me, it's not helpful in the conduct of policy. I suspect by year end, as I mentioned in my opening statements, there'll be a review about communications broadly, press conferences, dots.
Trump is throwing everything he can at the economy for the midterms.
Minutes.
He's got to get the economy up. He's got to take control of the Strait of Hormuz.
But I'm pretty
get that under
open-minded
control,
about what they could be. And I was
so that
just incredibly impressed.
Kevin Warsh can start to possibly lower rates.
Over the last 2 days, and frankly,
but right now there's still a lot of ambiguity there in Iran.
Changes and easy.
So that's throwing a curveball at the economy.
But our number one goal is to get monetary policy right.
So
monetary policy right is to deliver on the remit that Congress gave us, to deliver on price stability.
I think Mr. Warsh is going to be watching what happens in Iran before he does anything with interest rates.
What is your feeling
really
about these news conferences? Are you going to continue?
That's really what it's hinging on.
Every meeting, do you find them useful? What is the future for the way Kevin Warsh will communicate?
Well, this one's probably got another 15 or 20 minutes in it, so I don't want to prejudge the outcome. Press conferences can be a very useful way to communicate with households, businesses, and more broadly through using the likes of you. I had a great old mentor named George Schultz, and his mantra was press conferences are useful, but when you have one, you want to make sure you have something important to say. Today, I think we had something important to say about our commitment to deliver on price stability, our commitment to rethink practices with an eye of moving the Fed forward, and to give you and the American people a sense that these aren't idle thoughts, these are concrete thoughts, that we're going to seek out the best minds, both the best thinking inside of the Federal Reserve, and the best people I know in business and economics and the academy and technology and the rest, to share their views. That's what we're going to be doing here, the pursuit of truth. I think we're going to come up with some new and interesting things. We made some changes, and some of those might well be worthy of a press conference.
Hi, Chris Rugaber at Associated Press. Thanks for questions. Could you give us a sense of how you see inflation more in the long term? I know you may not want to comment on the ups and downs, but is this mainly driven by energy prices in the Iran war at this point, or do you have any concerns about underlying inflation pressures in the economy? Thank you.
So I can't do much better than the committee just did. So let me restate it. Inflation remains elevated relative to the committee's 2% goal, in part reflecting supply shocks that have driven price increases in certain sectors, including energy. That's the paragraph goes on to say, but to be clear, the Fed will deliver price stability. My own judgment is the committee spent quite a bit of time, not just in 2 days, but over iterations of a couple of weeks. That's what we're prepared to say about inflation, but the commitment to deliver is strong, unanimous, and unambiguous. And that's, I think, an important message. We've missed for 5 years, and we're going to fix that.
Well, great. And then just on the data task force and everything else, I mean, generally speaking, I think people feel the Fed looks at everything already. Certainly that was the sense from before. Is there data that you feel is not given enough weight? I mean, you mentioned the trim to mean in the past, but again, that's well known to certainly most Fed members. So what is that task force looking at, and what might be I mean, I know you don't want to prejudge the outcome, but are there examples of data that you expect might be given more weight? Thank you.
So you're answering my question. So let me say, I don't want to prejudge the outcome. I also don't want to say too much about what they're going to do, because I still have a phone call or two to make before I've nailed down the people that are doing that. I'm interested in what the outside experts' view is on the subject. I'll say this generally. Most of the data that central bankers and other government officials in the United States consume come with old-fashioned survey methods, a national accounts of what the U.S. economy looks like that looks very little like the U.S. economy in 2026. Survey methods that don't have response rates that we need, asking questions that might have been quite applicable a generation ago that are less applicable now. So even inside of official statistics, I would be open-minded if the task force and our own best thinking had recommendations how those official statistics can be brought up to a standard of our time using new analytic methods. I'd also say this, almost every private company CEO that's running his or her business are doing so with real-time information that isn't subject to much revision, that is telling them what just happened at that very moment. As you know, there are normal, long and variable lags in the conduct of monetary policy. What we're really interested in is what's happening right now. What we're less interested in is echoes of history. And you're hearing from my answer that some of the data that we receive, that we're waiting on, the first Friday after the month, the payroll index or something else, that might be an echo of history that's quite useful on its third revision. We need to take those error bounds down because we have to make hard decisions in real time. I'm really open-minded that there is a lot of new data sources.
So he's trying to get less revisions, more accurate information to make decisions. That makes a lot of sense.
Techniques that are far more refined than asking a simple question about whether something was core or non-core.
Edward. Thanks. Welcome, Mr. Chairman. Edward Lawrence with Fox Business. So if you don't give a lot of ongoing forward guidance, won't the markets have more volatility, and shouldn't Americans have more access into what you're thinking going forward?
So I think financial markets perform best when they react to incoming data. I think the financial markets work less efficiently when they ask a question, how will the Federal Reserve react to information? The more that markets are paying attention to what's happening in the real economy, deciding what's good data and what's less good data, the more financial markets can price what they believe is the most likely and what are the tail risks. Financial market prices are probably the most important source of information to guide central bankers. But when all the financial markets are doing is reflecting back what we've said, then we're taking the most important source of information and we're being blind to it. I'd like us to create a system where those blinders come off.
Dow's
Where
up
markets are
23 right
following
now.
data that they efficiently think is reliable, and they'll be watching data, we'll be watching data. They'll come with better information through market prices to us. We can make more informed decisions. But ultimately, the goal that I said at the outset, deliver on the price stability objective that Congress told us to do, and that we've got to get in the business of doing.
Yeah, if I could take you in the meeting a little bit. This is your first meeting. The board members seem fairly hawkish when you listen to, in general, when you listen to what they're saying. Was there any discussion of a rate cut going forward today?
There was one proposal on the table. There was no discussion of any other proposals. The discussion on that proposal, I would say, was quite limited. The group was unanimous and unambiguous on it. It has been the practice of this central bank and others to have a range of alternatives. Today we had one. I thought it furthered the discussion, deepened it, and made it clear what we needed to do and how we needed to deliver. I wouldn't prejudge what happens in the future, but there was only one big subject for us. We took it on. We had a good family fight on it for a couple of days, and we ended up, I think, in a better place.
Thanks a lot, Claire Jones, Financial Times. Coming to this blind, reading this very nice short statement that I think we've all appreciated in the room, one might wonder why you didn't raise rates today, considering what you're saying here about the risks to US inflation and your mandate. I guess, why not, and what would you need to see in order to get to that place? And secondly, on your task forces, are there any best practices at other central banks that you'd consider looking at? Thank you.
I'm glad they're in the practice of giving you two questions, because my answer to your first question was going to be very curt. I've got nothing more to say than the statement itself. And to the point of the question I got before, market reactions to what we say unfiltered, I think is more helpful than having delivered a statement, me then improvising further upon it. Ensure that the task forces have a range of people, both by backgrounds and predispositions, so they too can have a bit of a family fight. Make sure when you establish a task force that the group that's going to be the recipient of the information feels as though they've got some equities in it too. That's why we're looking for, haven't done the final roll call, some of the most significant talent we have in the building and across the reserve banks on each of these, and in some sense seconding them to this group for a period of some number of months, so that the leaders of the task force know what the most analytical central bank in the world thinks about that. They can reflect on it. And a final best practice, we're not outsourcing decisions to anybody. Administrations past and present, reserve banks have chosen a group of 19 people around the table. These will be our decisions. We can agree to some of the recommendations, disagree with others, have a good family fight about it. But what comes from them will, I hope and believe, make the discussion we have internally better, stronger, more of a dialectic, so that we can finally deliver on that price stability objective.
Just a quick follow-up on your markets point. If you look at 2-year yields, they're really suggesting that markets think more tightening is needed. Would that be your read on what the 2-year yield is saying as well?
We were in such a good place. This is why we don't do third questions, I presume. I'm not going to offer any commentary on market reaction over the last 30 or 60 minutes. What we've given markets is a new chapter for the central bank, some fresh thinking. What we've given markets and households and businesses, I think, is a commitment to ask ourselves hard questions such that we can deliver on the promises that we've made before. This is a lot of change for financial markets to digest. I wouldn't be particularly intrigued by how they react in the first several minutes or even first several days. What I think is most important is that financial markets, and at least as important, households and businesses know that this central bank will deliver on price stability.
Hi there, Chairman Warsh. Brian Chung with NBC News. Thank you for taking our questions. So when you say that we've dropped forward guidance for the layperson, that might sound like the Fed's going to say less or offer less insight into where their borrowing costs might go. So for the person that maybe you run into,
there you go. If you're in need of net
the
lease
price tags are
financing
rising at a faster
assistance,
pace than their wages at the moment,
give me a
how would
ring,
you explain to them? I don't know if tax rates might be the
760-803-6464.
answer there, but how would you kind of communicate
We're still
this
looking to
era,
do
this chapter
acquisition,
of
refi,
I told
cash
somebody
out,
in the
take out,
milk
construction,
aisle that
preferred
I'm a
equity
task force for that. I
financing
think that would be doing
for
a very poor
Starbucks,
job, but I
7-Eleven,
appreciate it.
Dollar General. We'll
When I
look
saw
at
somebody in the
Walgreens,
grocery store,
CVS,
what I would say to them
Tractor Supply,
we cannot
Chick-fil-A,
have a very
Raising
significant
Cane's,
effect on particular
Jack in the
prices.
Box, and many
The
others.
price of
Just call me
oil
on
in
my
the
cell,
markets today, or even the price of a dozen eggs.
760-803.
That does not have first order consequences to what we're doing.
760-803.
But we do have a really important job
6464
is
to
to make
watch
sure
more
that those
episodes of Net
changes
Lease
in oil
TV.
or beef or
Just
eggs or
visit our
milk
website,
don't broaden the economy, don't have second and third order effects. That's our job.
BELLAfinance.com.
commitment.
If you
That's
want to
our
meet up at
capability.
our
We're gonna deliver
office
on it.
in person in
is
San
the Fed's
Diego, Orange
relationship
County,
with
Beverly
the,
Hills,
Treasury
LA,
also under review as the
just
normal,
call me,
breakfast meetings with the Treasury
760-803.
Secretary is asking for things that we
6464,
keep doing
or
and
we can
had
do a
conversations
go-to
with
meeting
presidents
online.
concerning it.
Thank you for
From
watching
the
this
president,
episode
I
of Net
don't have
Lease
anything for
TV.
you.
And
With respect
great
to the Treasury
first
Secretary,
press
he has
conference,
been
Kevin
posting
Warsh,
pictures of our breakfast,
new
so I don't
Federal
think I can-
Reserve
I
Chairman.
don't think I
Thank you
can
so much.
deny
Have a
that.
great day.
The long tradition at the central bank is that the Fed Chairman and the Treasury Secretary